The Edmonton Oilers picked up a gutsy, resilient 1-0 win on the back of a strong Stuart Skinner shutout on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can enjoy the NFL playoffs with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, a real rock fight against the Kings, a great Stuart Skinner performance, and Connor McDavid's 28th birthday. So a whole lot to get to. And let's just come out and say it. That was a nail biter. That was a really tense, tight, not a lot of room hockey game. And in today's NHL, where offense is at a premium, the average NHL player has never been faster, never been more skilled. It's really a throwback, if you will. This is a very early 2000s type of hockey game where there's not a lot of room. And this gets back to one of our big themes of Locked On Oilers this season, the team's ability to win in a variety of different ways. And we don't have to be disingenuous about it. The Oilers don't want to play in games like this. 1-0, 2-1, 3-2. Those are the types of games where funky things happen, because the type of offense that typically permeates in this game, that ends up taking shape within the game, is one of attrition. It's one of waiting and patience. And in the course of a game where there's not a lot of room, it's very easy to get frustrated. It's very easy to get flustered, to start making mistakes, to funnel pucks to nowhere in particular, to bend into what the defensive team wants to do. And the Kings, as easy as it is to just rag on the Kings for not being adventurous, for not taking chances, for not focusing on creating offense, they play to their roster strengths. They have very gifted forwards in terms of their defensive ability. They have quality defensive defensemen. They don't have Drew Doughty, who's still out after suffering that injury in the preseason, but still, they have found ways to hang around. They have been in the playoff hunt the entire regular season, in spite of the fact that they're missing Doughty, who's their best defenseman and one of the best teams. They're 2 points behind the Oilers right now for second in the Pacific Division after tonight's game. And you just sit here and you think about it from an Oilers perspective. You have consistently run into this team in the postseason. You've played them in the first round 3 years in a row. If the playoffs started today, you would play them. There's a good chance that if the Oilers don't find a way to leapfrog the Golden Knights in the standings, that come mid-April for a fourth straight season, the Oilers will be seeing the LA Kings. Hopefully, if all goes well, the Oilers will have home ice once again, which does matter when you're playing a team like the Kings, who needs that defensive advantage that comes with having home ice, of last change, of having the ability to get your stick down second on faceoffs. Those little things, that home ice matters when you're playing a specialized team. And the Kings are a specialized team. And they played this game to their strengths. They made the Oilers really work hard for their offense. I thought that Darcy Kemper played a really good game in net. I thought this was a very even back and forth game, and a 1-0 scoreline reflects that. I think the Oilers missed ample opportunities in the empty net situation to extend their lead to 2-0. We can always talk about Connor McDavid's selflessness, how he tried to hit guys in that empty net situation multiple times, just trying to do the right thing because he didn't feel like he had a shooting lane. And this is an aside. This is something that I like talking about because I do think it's useful. I try with every fiber of my being as a hockey person to not yell shoot when I am watching the game on TV or if I am at the arena at the game, because the angles from the viewer perspective, whether it's on TV or in attendance at the arena, the angles look very different than what the player on the ice is seeing. Now, there are exceptions to that. If we're talking about a 2-on-1 where the attacking player waits too long to try and pass over to a shooter and the defenseman who's trying to break up the odd man rush gets their stick in the lane, that's a viable time where you can complain about a player taking too long to shoot. But in the case of McDavid passing in the neutral zone when he has one person in front of him and an open net with no goalie in it, I understand that in McDavid's head, he thinks, I am drawing people towards me. If I get this puck to someone who is more open, they're going to have a better look at the net than I do right now. And I trust the judgment of the player in the game situation because their instincts take over. You know, this was a really playoff type feel. There was no room to be had out there. I thought the Oilers did a reasonable job of adjusting as this game went along to trying to find a path to scoring consistently. That meant really, really simplifying what they do, because matchup wise, stylistically, this is not what the Oilers want to do. I wrote down in my notes, how do you break down a rigid structure that's set up to stop what you want to do? The Kings did a really good job in the neutral zone, forcing the Oilers to either dump the puck in, to turn the puck over at the blue line shortly after entering the zone, or to regroup in the neutral zone and circle back around. When you do that over and over and over again, it's easy to frustrate the other team. When you start to get frustrated, that's where you start to turn the puck over more. But to the Oilers' credit, they stayed in this game. They took what was in front of them. I thought their depth, I thought the Kapanen line did a reasonable job of just getting zone time. And even if you get zone time that doesn't lead to scoring chances, you're still actively making the other team chase the puck. You are not actively defending. Your goalie is not actively doing anything. He's able to just kind of watch the game develop in front of him as opposed to standing on his head. And as we've addressed a ton on this show, it's one of the show's recurring slogans. If Stuart Skinner needs to be the guy, the Oilers are going to have a hard time. If Stuart Skinner just needs to pull his end of the bargain, he just needs to do his job, the Oilers are going to win a lot of hockey games. And I'll be fair, Skinner was really good tonight. The save he made on Kempe in the first period was remarkable. And I think Skinner had one of, if not his best games of the entire season. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the second segment. But one last thing to get in here before we move on. The 4-on-4 environment is where you saw what the Oilers do. You saw the Oilers use their speed. You saw the Oilers create space with their speed and really put the Kings in conflict. And that's really the key to understanding how offense works in any sport, really. You want to put the defending team in conflict, meaning make them make a decision based on what you do. In the case of the 4-on-4 situation, Draisaitl turned on the afterburners. He beat Trevor Moore to the loose puck. Leon drove the net very hard. The rebound kicked out. They were able to set up McDavid. McDavid scored from the Leon spot, and that one goal, that was enough tonight. Now, most nights, one goal will not be adequate enough, but in the context of a singular game, one goal was a lot tonight. You had one of your team's best all-around efforts in a game. You only scored one goal. And I know that sounds a little counterintuitive. Well, Nick, they played so much better in this game or in that game. And look, you're probably right. They scored more goals. They didn't have to do at work as hard. They didn't have to withstand as much physical play. But they showed range tonight. They showed they were okay in these low-scoring, close-checking, tight affairs that are so prevalent in the NHL playoffs. But We're going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we're going to talk all things of Stuart Skinner, his performance tonight. I want to read some notes from the Athletics Anonymous Goalie Survey, which I think were very interesting in regards to Skinner, and a whole lot more, so be sure to stick around. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to make for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. If you went over to FanDuel, you would see we have the full slate for the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. The Texans heading to Arrowhead, where the Chiefs are 7.5-point favorites. The Commanders heading up to Detroit, where Detroit is 8.5-point home field favorites. Sunday afternoon, the Rams heading to Philly, where the Eagles are 5.5-point favorites. And then Sunday night, the two MVP frontrunners, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills, where the Ravens are 1.5-point road favorites. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we're breaking down the Oils 1-0 win against the Kings on Monday. And these types of games really emphasize what your team is good at. And when it's a low-scoring, tight game, these are the types of games you need your best players to be the difference. And that's the calculus the Kings are making in playing this style of game. Against a lot of teams in the NHL, the Kings' persistence to maintain defensive structure, to play a slow, plodding cycle, wear you down style, will eventually compromise another team. A team that doesn't have a McDavid, that doesn't have a Draisaitl, is going to get lulled to sleep. And I don't mean like literally they're going to stop playing because they're bored. It is going to force them to do things they don't want to do. And it was tough sledding out there for the Oilers in terms of chance creation. You know, in today's NHL, we've identified the most efficient play as the cross-seam pass, you know, attacking the net, moving the puck from the left to the right side of the slot, because it gets the goalie moving left to right, which is the best way to create a dangerous scoring chance because it's going to open up more of the net for you. And in a game like this, where the middle is just entirely impassable, you can't get the puck through at all, it forces you to play a lot more structured, and it forces you to string together a lot more consecutive passes to generate a quality scoring chance. You know, we typically associate rush offense with the most dangerous looks a team's going to create, because it's typically going to come with the defending team's defenseman skating backwards where they're at a disadvantage because they're always going to be skating slower backwards than the attacking player skating forwards. Goaltender has to be able to move from post to post in the case of said cross-seam pass. You also have the variability of what happens if the puck hits the defensive player in front of the goalie and how that impacts the goalie. But all of that to say, you saw a good defensive effort from the Oilers tonight, and I want to give credit where it's due. I don't think Stuart Skinner is capable of being a playoff series winning goalie. I don't think he's good enough to carry a team through a playoff series if the environment in front of him isn't strong enough. But if the Oilers are going to play as well as they did defensively tonight, and look, Skinner made some great saves. You know, the save he makes on Kempe where that puck ends up on the top of the net, that's one of the best saves he's made all season. And Skinner, for his size, he's got good size for an NHL goalie. He's got decent mobility. It really is just a matter of consistency and feeling good about his game. He is such a confidence-based player. And I know a lot of people who listen to me say that will say, well, Nick, he's a professional athlete. What do you mean he doesn't have confidence? Sometimes it really does vary. If you let in a stinky goal, that's going to weigh on you. You know, I love to draw comparisons between the quarterback position in football and the goaltender position in hockey. And one of the tenets, the core tenets of being a good quarterback in football is having a short memory of, wow, I just threw a touchdown. That's great. Versus I just threw an interception or I fumbled the ball. What do I do now? No, it happened. It's over with. I'm going to sit. We're going to get the ball back. And when I go back out there, I'm going to make a play. That's the mindset you need your goalie to have if they're going to be effective. And we have seen really good goalies lose it. You know, we're not that far removed from serious questions about Sergei Bobrovsky being an albatross contract in Florida. You know, we're 3 years removed from Sergei Bobrovsky being benched in the playoffs for a 19-year-old in Spencer Knight, who's yet to really carve out a position for himself in the NHL. And look, I know Spencer Knight has had off the ice stuff that's really inhibited his ability to carve out an NHL career, but that's not the point. I'm talking about the fact that Sergei Bobrovsky, who's gone on to lead a team to consecutive cup finals and win a cup, was on the fritz there. There was a real conversation as to whether or not the Panthers were going to find a way to get out of that contract in spite of how much money they were paying him and based on Bobrovsky's pedigree. But looking at where Skinner is in the pecking order, he's firmly in that middle tier of consistent NHL starters. And he doesn't have a huge NHL profile. You know, we're talking about 2.5 seasons of consistent NHL work as a starting goalie. And goalies probably develop the slowest because they start their NHL path the slowest. You don't really see goalies get NHL work in their early 20s. You typically don't see an NHL goalie break through as a starter until they're 24, 25, 26 even. And in Skinner's case, you think about where he's at he really saved this team on more than one occasion. You know, you think about where they were at, giving Jack Campbell that free agent contract and what Skinner's been able to do. The fact they haven't had to pay him a whole lot during his tenure has given them the flexibility to spend on other positions. And he was genuinely really good tonight. You know, the Kings had 10 high danger chances. He saved all of them. The Oilers only conceded 1.82 expected goals against, but he saved all of the scoring chances he faced. And the Kings generated 50 scoring chances tonight. And scoring chances are not commensurate with quality. As we know, there's always a lingering conversation about, do you want to be a volume team like the Hurricanes? Do you want to be a quality team like, say, the Rangers or Toronto, where you're willing to take fewer offensive scoring chances because A, you're creating off the rush more, and rush opportunities are more likely to be one and dones in the offensive zone, meaning you gain the zone, you take your scoring chance, and because you took your scoring chance, you're conceding possession. You aren't able to recover the puck. The other team gets it and goes back the other way. Real quick, I did want to read from the Athletics anonymous goalie survey. They interviewed a bunch of former NHL goalies and had them rank the goaltenders, for lack of a better expression. And Skinner is in the middle class. He is, and I'm going to quote here, he took his team to within one goal of a Stanley Cup final, one coach said. If one goal goes the other way, that's a different team with a 25-year-old goalie. Something that really stood out talking with retired goalies in particular was their admiration for Skinner's reaction to adversity. They know what it feels like to be benched, especially in the midst of a playoff run, and love how Skinner elevated his play after being replaced by Calvin Pickard midway through the series against Vancouver. I have been impressed by his resilience. I think there is an X factor there that you can't quantify. And tonight was an example of that. I don't think this is Skinner starting a crazy heater, but he showed you he can answer the bell in difficult situations. And he played one of his best games of the season. Anytime you as a goalie get the stat sheet at the end of the night and there's a 0 next to you for the goals against, you can hold your head high. And it's not always easy. It hasn't always been easy for Skinner this year. I've been very impressed with his ability to get back to an equilibrium, to find some balance, and to play well enough that we can really dispel any notion of Pickard getting more starts or the Oilers going out and adding another goalie. This is how they've assembled their roster. I am happy that Stuart Skinner has figured out what he needs to do to be successful at this level. And I'm glad he was able to thrive tonight in what was a difficult environment for a goalie to be successful. It's hard to match zeros. You think about those old school pitchers duels in baseball. Matching zeros is really hard to do. It doesn't take a lot to change the game. And Skinner was great tonight. We're going to take one more break on today's show. When we come back, we'll do yet another ode to the great Connor McDavid on the day after his 28th birthday, coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you forgot or forgot that you were even paying for twice. That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, the best feature is the goals tool. I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Remember, use our web address to let them know we sent you. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. And I love talking about Connor McDavid. I'm just going to come out and say it. Anytime you get to watch one of these forces of nature within their given sport, lace them up and go out there, it's a privilege. Guys like this are once every 10, 15, 20 years. The NHL is very fortunate that their last wave of generational guys, Ovechkin and Crosby, came in at the same exact time. Those two are the players that define that 2005 post-lockout to, I would say, about 2019. After 2019, we start to shift more towards McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews. You could throw Eichel in there. But in terms of the pantheon, and to crib from Bill Simmons, who coined the term and when thinking about the Basketball Hall of Fame and how easy it is to get in there, how to reimagine it, Connor McDavid is going to be an inner circle. He is going to be a Mount Rushmore figure in this sport when his career is over. Sitting here right now at 28 years old, if for some reason Connor McDavid decided, I don't want to play hockey anymore, I want to go weave baskets in Nova Scotia, he would be in the Hall of Fame in 4.5 years. There is not a conversation to be had. This is one of the best players to ever lace up a pair of skates and play professional hockey in the NHL. There are maybe 4 guys in the history of the sport you would say have a case as far as being a better player. Obviously, Gretzky's got the best resume. He's got all the stats. He's got all the awards. He's got all the cups. You would say, and I don't necessarily feel as strongly about this because he played so long ago, but most people would say Bobby Orr is in that conversation because of the resume as a defenseman, redefined the position in his era, all of the Norris trophies, winning a Hart Trophy as a defenseman, winning a Stanley Cup, great career. I think it's hard to compare to compare non-contemporaries because the games are different, but Orr is in that conversation. Of course, Mario Lemieux, a contemporary of Wayne Gretzky's as well. One of the highest peaks, arguably the single highest peak we've ever seen from a professional hockey player. One of the truly most electric Go, if you're too young, if you're like me and you didn't get to watch Mario Lemieux play when you were growing up, go watch the YouTube compilations that people have painstakingly stitched together from VHS tapes and low quality internet archives, because he is every bit as good as the old heads would tell you. After Wayne, after Mario, after Bobby Orr, this is where, to me, I think you could start making an argument for Connor McDavid. And I know there are people who are listening to this right now who are saying, well, what about Guy Lafleur? What about Sidney Crosby? What about Gordie Howe? And look, Sid has the better resume. Sid's got the cups. He's got the gold medals. He's got the Conn Smythe. And look, I know Connor has a Conn Smythe as well, but he doesn't have the cups. He doesn't have the gold medals. That matters. When we are talking about the all-time greats, what you have in your trophy case does matter. I will say, I think in terms of physical ability, I think there's a strong argument Connor McDavid is the most physically gifted hockey player we have ever seen. When you talk about his combination of skating, playmaking, and frankly, his resilience. I know that's weird to say about a player who you wouldn't define as gritty or overly physical, but Connor McDavid's mental toughness to be as good as he is for as long as he's been. He walked into the NHL as a child, as the age we send people off to college as freshmen. He walked into the NHL and he was instantly one of the 10 or 15 best players in the world. It took him like 2 years and he was arguably already the best player in the world. And now at 28, he is unquestioned the best player in the world. He commands instant respect. He's very much in the phase of his career where he could win the Hart Trophy every single year if the voters really wanted him to, because he is that good. He is that deserving. He is that valuable. But when you get to this point, 28 is where the mortal NHL player starts to look at their physical ability. Are they declining? Where can I refine my game? What can I tweak about my game? Sidney Crosby's reinvented himself a bunch of times throughout his career as his game has changed because his body has changed. LeBron, of course, has reinvented himself 3 or 4 times throughout his 20 plus years in the NBA at this point because his body has changed. Is McDavid going to change how he plays as he gets older if he loses his foot speed? Is he going to be more of a facilitating player who doesn't have that zone entry in his toolbox, so he has to do things more in the neutral zone? Is he going to be able to add a grindy component to his game the way Sidney Crosby has, where you can make an argument that Crosby, through the use of his lower body, he can out leverage pretty much everybody on loose pucks. And I don't think I've seen Sid lose a puck battle in the last 5 years, because as he's gotten older, he's gotten such a masterful understanding of how to use his body to win puck battles. And it's one of the great gifts of the truly great players that they are so unbelievably talented that they have the capacity to reinvent themselves and still be high end, to still be super effective. And at this point, we know the goal. Connor wants him a cup. He'll have a chance at a gold medal next year in Milan. You get the gold medal, get yourself a Stanley Cup. Get yourself in that conversation with Mario and Wayne for the best ever. It's not out of the question. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers. Happy birthday, Connor.